the reality is, with my professional progression and the opportunities that I've realized, any success is credited to the people that have been around me. And you want to be in the right place at the right time, and you want to treat those relationships with the respect and the care and the dignity that is required. But the thought of myself as an entrepreneur, or the notion that I'm really an entrepreneur, I just enjoy the relationships, and I enjoy thinking of success as something that we can all share instead of a zero-sum game.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening to the Future of Construction podcast. Today I am speaking with Sam Dowd. He is the sales director at Viking Fence and Viking Rentals. Sam, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's actually I'm gonna toss you an easy one. How did we meet? Do you remember?
We met getting barbecue in Austin, Texas. So that was a fantastic lunch outing. I think that we met through Phil at AGC, or am I mistaken there? Did he make that connection for us?
I was trying to think about this on my way over, and I was like, how did I actually meet Sam? Because I feel like we kind of just instantly became friends over barbecue.
Yes. That's a great way to make friends in Austin, for sure. Show people that are either new to Austin or maybe not as familiar with the barbecue scene some of those under the radar spots. So
absolutely.
I always find that's a good way to make friends and develop community.
I brought Jason back there after a yoga session, and I was like, we have to go eat the best barbecue I've had.
Yeah, it's yoga and then barbecue. It's a balanced day, for sure.
So you run, and I'm going to read here, you run the Commercial and Construction Real Estate Happy Hour in Austin. It's been something you've been developing for a long time. How long have you been developing it?
So I started that Construction and Commercial Real Estate Happy Hour, Central Texas Construction and Commercial Real Estate Happy Hour.
It up.
It's
Sorry.
a mouthful.
Yeah.
No, you're good. It started in March of 2023. I was working as a construction-focused insurance broker, and at the behest of a friend and mentor of mine in the industry, shout out Brian Hunt, I was encouraged to build this network and build this kind of sense of community. He had worked through this and developed his own happy hour when he was a broker at another firm called Aon. And he said this was a great way for me to reach out to contacts in the construction industry and a great way for me to make connections. So go beyond that role of insurance advisor or risk consultant and bring some people together and serve as a conduit for that construction community.
How did you start?
With his help, we got Phil Thoden and Shiloh Rowe and some other folks that I had met through the Construction Leadership Council, Austin Associated General Contractors, and from my work as a construction-focused insurance broker, I started talking to people and I'd already made some connections with general contractors to trade partners and vice versa. I got to know some folks in the commercial real estate space, and they were always looking for great commercial GCs. So moving beyond the minutia and the day-to-day drudgery of a product like property and casualty insurance was really compelling for me. So I thought, I get beers with these people already, and we share a lot of life together. So maybe we could have a structured format where we get together once a month, try to be as consistent as possible with this, and then just see if we can grow it and establish a little bit momentum.
And I mean, ever since it's been growing, I mean, it's the number one happy hour I think I've attended while I was in Austin over the last couple of months. It's fantastic.
You've enjoyed it?
Oh, it's phenomenal. I mean, the amount of people that come out and that are eager and excited for this specific happy hour is it's astounding, frankly. And compared to all the other happy hours that I've attended, it's one that where there's a very consistent group that keeps coming back, that keeps spending time with one another.
Yeah, it's been really special because, again, from that insurance perspective, I wanted to be a good steward of people's time and energy. When I first got involved with CLC as a younger professional, I'm not so young anymore, but I got involved with the Construction Leadership Council, and I had conversations with Phil, the president of AGC, and some other folks that were responsible for serving on the steering committee or the advisory board, whatever the nomenclature is there, but they were responsible for organizing the clay shoots and organizing the golf tournaments and organizing these school supply drives. And I thought, if I treated every single conversation at a CLC or AGC event as an opportunity to bring in more revenue and push this product or find some way to finagle my way to a conversation with a CFO or a purchasing director or someone who was responsible for handling the property and casualty insurance, I could alienate a lot of people. So my intent and my motivation when I was serving in that role was to move the conversation beyond that sometimes convoluted and really mystifying insurance conversation and just get to know these professionals on a personal level. So as it's moved beyond the business development and sales thrust or motivation, it's really been about sharing life together and elevating the commercial construction community. So you see the same people, and then they start telling more people, and they start telling more people. And so, like when you joined us weeks ago, it was, okay, we've got some general contractors here and we've got some trade partners here. And I try to be a good steward when people come into the happy hour, people come and share that experience with us. Who can I introduce you to? Or we've got these companies here that are represented. What would be a good partnership for you? Or do you see anybody here that you'd like to meet? So I think that has caught on, and I'm organizing this with a lot of different people now. So we get sponsors, and sometimes they're general contractors, and sometimes they're trade partners, or sometimes they might be some kind of ancillary service provider. But I really want to foster that welcoming environment and that sense of community.
I mean, community in construction is so critical. And I think one of the things, I was actually just sitting down with the president of the AGC here, the Houston chapter. And we were talking about how just even the younger community and engaging them outside of work and how that's changing and how we need to think differently about how to do that as you see your community evolving and still like very much the critical elements of business development and shaking hands and getting to know each other beyond just I'm selling you a product is so critical in this industry because it's built on trust. How do you see that, or have you already started seeing that evolve in how your community is kind of evolving and developing?
I think that what's been really special for me and my family, we go beyond sharing work and sharing projects and sharing opportunities to sharing a lot of life. So, for instance, I wanted to share this story with you because I don't think we got to it over barbecue, but one of the staples of the construction happy hour is a younger entrepreneur and helps manage a successful general contracting firm. We were in the hospital and we had brought our son home. So that was a Friday to a Sunday. And unbeknownst to me, this guy had organized a meal train for our family for the entire first week that we were home from the hospital with our son. So he organized it with some trade partners and even guys that worked at other general contracting firms. And so every night it was somebody bringing home a meal for us, meeting our son, connecting with Grace, checking in on the family. And so in terms of the evolution, these are people that I have really enjoyed doing business with. And there's that trust and that rapport there where we know that if we need to step in and help support in some kind of way, whether it's family, whether it's professional, or really any context, we can come together and really make sure that we're supporting each other. So I think that's really special. And a lot of people have stepped up for me to help me find opportunities, to help me find even different job opportunities. So it's been really incredible to me to watch the whole thing grow and evolve. And I don't do it by myself. There's a lot of people that are out there that are carrying the torch and speaking to its value. So as it grows, I just want to make sure that we're always doing a good job of stewarding that conversation, because it's different when you have 20 people assembled at a happy hour versus 120 people.
I bet.
And it might take you 10 or 15 minutes to walk across the room to say, Chloe, I want to introduce you to such and such contractor, to make sure that y'all have an opportunity to connect and take things from there. But I have heard some really wonderful success stories out of it, and I don't do it alone. So that's a really important part for me to remember.
I'd love to dig into that. What's changed since kind of the first ones?
Well, I think that as far as change is concerned, the growth just in sheer numbers has been really incredible to see. The change for myself has just been, again, how do I make sure that I'm fostering those connections, right?
Hmm.
Because if I have the opportunity to say, this, Mercator sounds like a great idea, and I'd love for more people to hear about it. I would love to have the opportunity to promote it in my own way and introduce you to some people that I know could be interested in adopting a platform like that. It's just been more challenging for me. Again, I rely on other people that are in that space and making the happy hour a priority to help steward that. So it does all come down to stewardship. So
Yeah.
when you have 20 people and you have the opportunity to have quality FaceTime with every single one, and then months later, you see somebody across the room and you're getting flagged down by a number of different people, and you don't have the opportunity to make that in-person connection. Or you might see that someone's standing by themselves and they're still waiting for an intro and a conversation, or they maybe feel out of place. I want people to have a positive experience, and I want people to feel welcome and feel like they have a seat at the table. It's just been challenging for me sometimes to really make sure that I have the time and the energy to allocate the appropriate resources to that. So,
I bet. I mean, classic, right? You start with a small group, you're all getting together pretty frequently, starts word of mouth, starts to grow. All of a sudden, you have hundreds of people showing up, and you're trying to create the same electric atmosphere that you had in the beginning. And now you're trying to do it across hundreds of people, and making sure that folks like me who are like, new to the city and
yeah,
not quite sure where I fit in, making sure that there's, introductions happening and conversations happening. And I can tell
absolutely.
you that, I mean, you do such a fantastic job of it. I can tell you that even just the following week, I was at another event at the rodeo for the AGC, and lo and behold, I saw somebody that I knew from Sam Happy Hour,
Excellent.
and it was hugs. It was, how are you doing? We had rapport, and we started to kind of build that relationship. And so, it's something that's really meaningful to this industry, because it's always been something that's been a part of this industry. Relationships. I think about my father and, how he brought me up knowing the importance of relationships in business, and how very much so he held a lot of those relationships and continues to, because he will not stop working. He's like into his 60s, well into his 60s, and he won't stop working. But just the importance of those relationships, because they're really the foundation of all the work that has come and all the work that will come.
Yeah.
And I'm curious how you've seen the change and what you're seeing in the community kind of translate to your, I guess, your work life. Like, it's quite challenging. Like, it sounds like you are such an entrepreneur in the community. Have you faced the same kind of ease of building that kind of community? Have you faced the same ease with change in your business life, at work?
Yeah. Those that know my progression for this year know that it's not been without its challenges. And I think that one of the things that I want to keep in mind, and I've shared with you, you met Grace at the AGC barbecue. I'm married to a mental health therapist, and it's something that we talk about pretty frequently. There's balance and there's routine, and there's this mentality that you can't pour from an empty cup, right? So when I have the opportunity to see some of my favorite people once a month, or sometimes once a week, as it turns out, we're in a very busy event season. So there's a social component that feels very enriching and feels like it really recharges us. And I think Grace would say I'm a little bit more extroverted than she is, but the reality is, with my professional progression and the opportunities that I've realized, any success is credited to the people that have been around me. And you want to be in the right place at the right time, and you want to treat those relationships with the respect and the care and the dignity that is required. But the thought of myself as an entrepreneur, or the notion that I'm really an entrepreneur, I just enjoy the relationships, and I enjoy thinking of success as something that we can all share instead of a zero sum game. So when I find out that my friends get a really great project that they've been lobbying for, they bid on, and then they get the notice to proceed and they get to bring us in as a trade partner, it's really exciting. And when I find out that someone gets another opportunity at a company that I know has a great culture and their values align with ours, and there's this emphasis on really work-life balance and it matches their professional goals and aspirations, I think that's fantastic. And sometimes it comes down to an introduction that one of us in this community has made. And sometimes it comes down to something that's completely independent of what we've worked on and what we've fostered as a construction community in Austin. But I think that, again, the support for the people that know us, my family, and know what we value and what we prioritize has been really instrumental in both maintaining my mental health, my sanity, and really helping open doors for me. So when I came onto this role as the sales director, whatever that entails, whatever that means, right? You're trying to steward these opportunities. You're trying to work in this business development role and help reestablish some certain processes and procedures and foster a really collaborative and thoughtful and professional culture. And they walk into an AGC event, or they walk into a happy hour, and they see there's Chloe and there's Phil and there's all these other wonderful people that are part of this. They're a part of the growth and they're a part of the evolution of the construction industry as we've seen it. I think it lends itself to a certain level of credibility. And that's been a lot of just intentionality on my end, and working on myself and working on my marriage and working on my ability, or lack thereof, sometimes as a communicator. So I really just try to make sure that all these conversations have the oxygen and the empathy and the respect that they deserve and that's called for in the situation, because you never know when you're going to meet a Chloe or a Phil or some of these other wonderful folks that are in the space that are helping everything move forward.
You bring up a really interesting topic that I don't think gets broached enough in this industry. Now, coming from kind of outside the industry, yes, I come from a construction family, but I was never actually, truly embedded in industry until we started Mercator. I'm curious, is that a shift that you're seeing? Like, just the openness around mental health, the openness around how do I stay healthy, stay sane, and, continue to, yes, attend all these like after work or late afternoon events and turn myself on so that I can, perform from a business development standpoint, right? I talk about like, sometimes you gotta turn the face on, you gotta turn the extrovert on,
Absolutely.
right? Have you noticed a change in the conversation, that people are more open to having the mental health and the well-being conversation?
I have, yeah. And I think that, again, being in the position that I'm in, being married to a mental health professional and having the opportunity to learn from her and learn from her experience and invest in that conversation with her and with my community, there is more of a focus on mental health and suicide prevention. It's something that affects our industry, and sometimes people are a little bit more reluctant to talk about it. But you'd be hard pressed to find somebody in the industry that hasn't seen self-harm behaviors in their organization or in other organizations with which they're linked, or some kind of story of suicide, or some kind of story of just major burnout. And so the evolution for me has been really interesting, because it goes from, okay, are we coddling people, or are we not emphasizing accountability, versus are we working to foster this sense of shared ownership of the mental health conversation? Are we taking care of our good employees? It costs more for us to replace that employee, and we're dealing with a
Heck
labor
yeah.
shortage in the construction industry as it is. So, do we want to modify, tweak, evaluate our approach to our relationships internally with our employees or our relationships with our trade partners? Or do we continue business as usual and sweep this under the rug and pretend that we can just grit our way through it? And so I think a lot of the savviest general contractors, whether they have an EAP or employee assistance program or access to some kind of counselor or mental health provider, I think that there is going to be a lot more work that needs to be done in terms of total buy-in,
Mm.
but there is an emphasis on ensuring that it all comes down to stewardship, right?
Hmm.
That we're being
Hmm.
good stewards of the conversation. And I think that once the companies see that it is bringing additional opportunities their way, it's a good PR move. It's great to continue to build those relationships with the developers and the trade partners and all these folks in the community. I think that it's a really powerful shift because the mentality or the thought process that we are just a rough and tumble industry and we're just going to work our way through all of this has been proven to be false. And so, again, the companies that are really ascending and taking over a lot of market share in Central Texas are the ones that have taken a more thoughtful and progressive approach to mental health and suicide prevention. So I'm just, again, trying to be a good steward of that conversation. And sometimes
Yeah.
it just means picking up the phone and calling
Mm.
somebody and checking in and saying, hey, I know I caught you at this event last week and you had expressed that you were struggling a little bit. Like, do you have an opportunity to talk about it? Or if we want to go grab a beer, we can. If we want to go take a walk or take the opportunity to decompress a little bit, I'm certainly here for you, because I had a lot of people reaching out to me through some of the shifts and changes in
I
my
bet.
careers over the years. So
Yeah.
I think that it's been really important for me to be thoughtful and mindful of that conversation in ways that I can support people.
What are you noticing? You mentioned that there are companies that are really leading the way, and as a function of putting this as more of the forefront, putting mental health and putting suicide prevention as more of the forefront. What are you noticing in those companies that's different than how it's been done?
First of all, they're addressing that the problem exists.
Mm.
They're addressing the problem. So there might be a company that has lost an employee to suicide or somebody that's burned out because of alcohol or drug abuse. And previously, where that may have been, okay, next man up, we're done with this project manager, we're done with this individual, and we're ready to move forward with a different employee in that role, and we'll continue on business as usual. They're taking more time to evaluate the approach. They're taking more time to and more resources to invest in an employee assistance program. They're
Mm.
getting their folks signed up for, I know AGC and ABC and some of these other groups in Central Texas have mental health and suicide prevention panels.
Mhm.
So when a construction executive, someone who is really, really successful, stands up and says, this is a problem and this is how we're addressing it, then I think that shines a really thoughtful light on the equation or the question, and has, gives us an opportunity to say, yes, this is valid, this is reasonable, and we need to be really pragmatic about the way that we address this. But we can also strive to achieving a lot more thoughtful outcomes, both internally and for our customers.
Absolutely. And I mean, you talk about total buy-in as well. And I mean, what are you seeing, whether inside mental health and that conversation or just generally as a response to change? What are you seeing are the main blockers to total buy-in when it comes to leadership?
I have had experiences in the past, and we won't dive
Not
into
to
that
put
too
you on
much
the
today.
spot.
No, I have had experiences where if people find out that I'm married to a therapist and she runs a successful therapy practice in Austin, there's this thought process. If you come from a different school of thought or a different generation or just a different ideal set of ideals or set of beliefs entirely, it's this thought that, okay, this is a weak train of thought, or this is just you're showing your cards to both executive leadership and to your customers that this work is too much for you to handle. And I think that, again, there's been a certain realization that we can be really thoughtful about this without really pulling away any of the accountability and the ownership for employees or different stakeholders for this conversation, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's really about, okay, we still have to get a project done on time. We still have to get a project done on or under budget. We still have to communicate, and we have to lay out some harsh truths for trade partners, or we have to lay out some harsh truths for our clients. But at the end of the day, we can be really pragmatic about that conversation to say, okay, we're not going to necessarily take a relationship with a trade partner and completely burn this bridge because their project manager is completely burned out. Maybe they're going through a divorce. Maybe they're not seeing their kids as often as they would like. Maybe they've seen somebody in their life that has been self-harming or took their own life. There's always a story to that element of burnout and that element of
100%.
fatigue. So I think we just all have to be realistic with ourselves to say, we could talk about this. And, traditionally it's been a male dominated industry with a lot of that bootstrap mentality. I think that what's really encouraging to me is that more people are willing to stop and listen, and they can decide for themselves whether or not that's what they want to adopt or what they want to implement in their own companies. I think they'll realize sooner or later, if they don't adopt a lot more thoughtful and progressive approach when it comes to mental health, that they'll be the outlier and they'll be the cultural kind of anomaly in this construction industry. Because I can speak for Austin particularly and the community that we've built. It's not about, again, shirking any responsibility. It's not about not being a hard worker. We're up early. We're getting to bed late. We're meeting project deadlines. We're holding people accountable. We're holding ourselves accountable. At the end of the day, we just have to be realistic. We can't do it all, and you can't have it all the time. So,
And I feel like COVID shifted a lot of that as well. I even look at my own calendar. I had to dramatically change how much time I was spending in back-to-back calls, not realizing that, when we were more in person, the travel time was actually decompression time.
yeah.
And there was an opportunity to actually take time to change context between all the different things you do in a day.
Yeah.
And I can only imagine that as more and more young people step into the construction industry, that emphasis, and I can share a bit of what we do at Mercator, but that emphasis on a person only has so much time.
Yeah.
Right? And so where do we spend that, and how do we make it, as meaningful as possible? I remember one of the, as a startup, very similar to a construction company starting up, or just kind of the grassroots bootstrap, business that a lot of our customers start out in, right? Like you're hustling and you're hustling hard, and the difference between you and the business isn't always very clear. And you expect that level of dedication out of your team and out of your staff. And sometimes you don't realize, okay, there needs to be a break here. And in fact, we actually ran into something earlier this year where we were pushing our teams so hard. We had to make a policy in our culture that we're very PETA oriented. I don't know if that's going to insult anyone or
You're good.
make everyone
You're
look
good, yeah.
poorly on me, but instead of, two birds, one stone, we say two birds, one scone, but we changed it to three birds, one scone, right? Your people, your product, and your profit in that order. And we're really, really dogmatic now about putting them in that order.
Yeah.
We can't build amazing product without amazing people who are ready to do the implausible, right? Yeah. And that product won't be fantastic for our clients and generate the profit to be able to create more of that and bring in more amazing people if our people aren't healthy first.
Yeah, absolutely. So in your philosophy, an approach that is very mindful of that mental health connection and avoiding that burnout equates to a better experience for your customers, right?
And yet it's the most uncomfortable kind of backwards way of working based on how we were all raised in industry, right?
Yeah.
And I can tell you that the discomfort of slowing down, knowing that the quality of what we produce and the actual speed we'll get out of slowing down, it feels awkward. It feels uncomfortable. It feels unnatural. And it's something you really have to work on as a leader to say, okay, this is going to be okay.
Yeah.
Adopting this new method is going to be okay.
Yeah.
And especially when you consider the risk of, okay, well, what if it doesn't work out?
Yeah.
You know, I've been hammering my team this whole time and we've been getting shit done.
Yeah.
But what happens if it doesn't work out if I apply a different method?
Yeah.
And I think that's something I've had to battle just as much as any of the other leaders in this industry have had to battle.
Yeah.
Of like, if I adopt a new method, will we still be as successful as we are today? Or is it based on the method that we've been applying so far? And we never think of it could be more successful. Yeah. That's the thing.
Yeah.
You know, we always think about the negative outcome, not the potential positive outcome.
You'll never know until you actually prioritize it, right? You'll never know. And I think some of the resistance to change in the construction industry and I know that one of the items that we've discussed and one of the items that we still have to unpack is the adoption of new technology for construction companies. And I think that if there is this old guard, and you can think of old in terms of age, or you can think of old in terms of just an old school philosophy in terms of, again, grit and that bootstrap mentality. We've done it this way for so long, and sure, certain people have burned out and relationships have gone by the wayside and Bill's on his third wife, but we're crushing it.
Right.
And you think at the expense of what
who?
though? Yeah. The what, the who, the why. So you take a step back and you look at, okay, we're burning ourselves out. And is there a more efficient and more thoughtful way that puts a little bit of humanity back in the conversation, right? So I think that from my experience from the good companies and then the not so great companies has been, there should be a value and a priority placed on the things that really energize your employees. And again, that doesn't mean that work from home means you clock in at 10 and maybe you take a couple calls and maybe you attend an event here and there and maybe you book a meeting, maybe you don't, but still drawing a paycheck. You're just hanging out, relaxing, could work from anywhere. It's really about, okay, there is a lot of opportunity out there. We're giving you the flexibility and we're giving you the autonomy and the freedom. And this has been my style. I want to trust that you'll just be a good steward with the resources and that you'll do what you're supposed to do. And if you're a sales professional, if you're really geared towards those improving customer outcomes and building new revenue opportunities, then you will work from Mexico, you'll work from Texas, you'll work from Colorado, and you'll spend that time with your family. You'll get recharged. You'll spend that time socially, or even if you need to take time to tune out and go to the gym or go out for a run or whatever the case may be, make sure you come correct when you're back at work and make sure that you're treating, again, your coworkers and all the other stakeholders in this conversation with respect and with dignity. And if you do feel like you're trying to pour from an empty cup, then let's take a step back and figure out, okay, what can we do better as an organization to support you and make sure that you're not falling into this burnout trap? So for me, it's about, okay, I know that some of my days start at 7 or earlier. They end at 9 or later. If we have an event after work, that means I'm going to be on pretty much all day. That also means that maybe I can take the liberty to take my son and my wife and go out for a walk in the morning the next day and go for a little bit of time to get some sunshine, get some fresh air and recharge so that when I hit that first call the next day, I'm ready to go. And I do enjoy the customer facing events. I do enjoy connecting with the community. I need the opportunity to recharge just like anybody else. So if I just came into an organization and they said it's all about the numbers and it's going to be 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., I've experienced that before. It's not for me. We're probably missing the mark, right? So you're really creating this atmosphere of work at any cost, no matter what what relationships fall by the wayside, no matter what you have to forsake or whatever kind of priorities you have to shift, just get it done. And I think we're seeing a move away from that by and large, because we're we're still we're still people that in the construction industry, I feel like we're still a group that enjoys that socialization, and we work to provide a living for our families, and we work to provide opportunity for our families. And if we don't have the opportunity to reassess and recalibrate every so often, then we're just running around in circles. It's a tough deal.
It's interesting. Your approach of work and approach to finding balance is very avant-garde in many ways, especially in this industry. I remember a leader of mine in a past career had kind of painted this picture for me, and it was kind of mind-blowing the first time I heard it, which was, we might pull you in for a pitch on a weekend, but that means you take your time back somewhere else, right? And that means like the 9 to 5 doesn't actually always apply to you. Have you always kind of found yourself as being an early adopter, or do you consider yourself an early adopter?
Well, I think that the mental health angle and the work that I've done, again, in my marriage, in my community, and with my own personal and professional life has really impacted me in a profound way. So there have been opportunities for me to reassess and recalibrate in terms of my morning routine and my evening routine, and look at how that affects my ability to connect with people and build community and really show up, right? Again, for me, it is, and I know I keep harping on it, but it's about stewardship, right? So how do I really maintain that stewardship and take care of myself so that I can be a better husband, so that I can be a better father? And so that's, as far as early adopting, I was probably really late in the game, but there's been a focus on, again, the physical and the mental health, the opportunity to recharge and refocus, so that when I do have the opportunity to lead a call, or I do have the opportunity to report back to executive leadership, or I have the opportunity to coordinate an event or help host a happy hour or what have you, I can show up and really make sure that people do feel a sense of welcoming, and they feel a sense of belonging, and they feel like there is a spot for them in this construction community. In terms of the technological aspect, I think that I've advocated for any tool, as we mentioned earlier, that can allow a professional sales organization, any kind of business development operation, to focus on what they do best is worth an evaluation. So if we're taking Phil's conversation with you and extrapolating that out or unpacking that a little bit more, my thought process on a platform like Mercator, if we have a team of sales professionals, outbound sales professionals that are interacting with these general contractors and these other specialty trade contractors in Central Texas and all over the state of Texas, really every single day, and we know that they're extroverted, and we know that they're really engaged with their customers, and they followed superintendents and project managers from job to job to job. If there's an opportunity for them to focus on those relationships, and we can take that background research and the quest for information and navigating around clunky websites, if we can take some of that off their plate and avoid some of that burnout by adopting a technology like Mercator, I'm all for it. So I think that it's really exciting to think about the implications of adopting technology that can help improve workflows and improve processes for people to really stay plugged in and stay passionate about their jobs. Because if you're a relationship-oriented person, then you shouldn't have a workday that's structured around spreadsheets and structured around all of the research. There might be a little bit of satisfaction to putting together that puzzle and figuring out how you get on that project.
Mm-hmm.
But if the if the box is turned over or thrown across the room and you can't find those pieces, then you really run the risk of burning yourself out because you're not doing what you set out to do, which is build those relationships and find those opportunities in person. So I like to think of myself as somebody that is very pragmatic and very kind of analytical about adopting technology or adopting lifestyle or any kind of modifications to my health or mental wellness routine. But I mean, I'm curious to hear from you in terms of the early adopters for the construction industry. I mean, does Austin influence that conversation for you at all? Does that really factor into how you're marketing Mercator? Or, I mean, I know that FOMO piece is big for you. So how have you found yourself marketing Mercator to an Austin audience versus a Houston audience? Or does that make sense?
Yeah. And it's interesting because I guess for us, what we try and do more than anything is try and get down to like, what is it that you're actually really wanting to do more of?
Mhm.
And what is it that is the pain that you want to just take away? And what we recognize more often than not is actually, we've got a whole bunch of people walking around with, chronic migraines that they never knew that there was something that could take that away, right? And so part and parcel is an education, right? It's an education of, okay, I can actually do more of the extroverted relationship development that I'm particularly interested in, that drives me, that really, sparks joy in my life,
Mhm.
right? And I don't have to do as much of the research component of it. And I think one of the reasons why we actually came to Texas was because there were honestly just more folks ready and open to adopting new technology. Like, this has been quite an amazing ecosystem to be a part of and to watch evolve. And not just through bringing Mercator to the table, but also bringing, I watch kind of permit flow show up. I watch, terra firma show up. I'm starting to see, more and more of my colleagues in the construction tech space show up in Texas, specifically because the adoption is so strong.
Mhm.
And so talking about, do we market differently in Austin than we do in Houston? Not necessarily, because at the end of the day, regardless of, belief systems and approaches, everybody does the same work. I remember saying this when I was in marketing and advertising, and we were on these huge automotive clients, and then we'd switch over and we'd be on, healthcare and then consumer goods. And I got to see, like, oh my God, north of like 30 different industries and how they operate.
Mhm.
And I remember saying, data is data is data. The problems that people deal with in construction, whether you're a subcontractor or supplier or general contractor, whether you're operating in Houston or whether you're operating in Austin or Dallas, Fort Worth or San Antonio, at the end of the day, it's about, business developers and getting them doing more of what they love doing versus doing a lot of research and kind of painstaking digging around. And that to me is where all of these differences kind of collapse down,
Mhm.
and we start to just look at tech adoption as, okay, do you have this problem or do you not?
Yeah.
And if you do have this problem, then here are resources and solutions that can help address that problem or help get you through that problem. And if you don't, then what are your problems and what solutions are out there to solve those? And I think that's what we probably struggle with the most, both as an industry, like a construction tech industry, and also as industry, as the construction companies that we sell to, is identifying that actual pain point. And that's really kind of I think that's the catalyst for change, at least from what I've seen, is a real solid understanding. And I think Francis Hester from Captain Hook Dumpsters did a really good job of painting this in our last podcast, or one of our last podcasts, was this is how we actually took the wrong approach, right? We put tech first. and then figured out how to adopt it instead of taking the problem first and then figuring out what solution, like what tech could help us find that solution. And it seems like you have actually a really clear perspective on, if we need to get more of our people loving what they're doing every single day, it's about how do we bring in tech that enables, allowing them to do more of that instead of less of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I've talked about with my team is, okay, we're outbound sales professionals, and there are these opportunities to get plugged into AGC and ABC and all these other associations that will bring together your customers and your future customers. If you're working off of some of these other platforms where they send an ITB out to 10 different site service companies or 10 different, because we're working in a lot of different industries right now. We're working on a lot of different product lines and product services. So there's competitors for Viking in all these different spaces. What if we had the opportunity to pursue that conversation and be that much more proactive instead of reactive? And you have the opportunity to learn about that project. You have the opportunity to learn about who the stakeholders are with that project. And you realize, I have a connection there, or that's been somebody that I've really wanted to work with for quite some time. And so you move beyond that ITB where you might be just another name and another site service company or fence company, custom iron company. And you have the opportunity to be really proactive and engaging and say, I've already done my homework. I've already done my research. And it turns out we work with you in these different markets and we have these relationships. So whether it's really a mindset shift for the sales team, or it's just a matter of implementation and they're already just ready to go, I think that you can't engineer the human element out of sales and business development, and you can't engineer that personal touch out of those conversations. You can put those tools in place to just streamline things a little bit more once you identify and define and like really calibrate that problem. You can take a different approach to tell your sales team. It creates a lot of ownership for the sales team too, to say, hey, we've listened, we've heard you, we understand that all of this extra research, this background nonsense that you've had to work on, we're working to take that off your plate. Because one of the questions that I ask from my team is, how can this organization better support you? So that might be the association memberships. That might be more customer facing events. That might be sponsorships at the barbecues and rodeos and clay shoots and all these other wonderful things. But to look at the problem critically and objectively. And I think one of the questions that we were looking to address is, how do you really create that buy-in from a company when you have those conversations with your team and you show all the employees that we're looking for feedback. We're looking for an opportunity to extend this conversation and really have this dialogue with you. I've worked in organizations where that hasn't been prioritized, and it leaves you feeling like, okay, they're not really looking for someone to bring ideas and energy to the table. They think that they've got it figured out. So where does that leave me in this organization? But if you have the opportunity to open up the conversation and ask for some kind of collaboration and some kind of extended discussion with your team, I think that helps with employee retention. I think it helps with employee engagement. And overall, I think it creates a much more positive experience for your customers.
I couldn't have put it better, Sam. Honestly, thank you so much for having this conversation with me.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
An absolute pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
For everyone who wants to learn more about Viking Fence, Viking Rentals, how can they find you? How can they find more about or find out more about the happy hours as well?
Yeah, I don't have Instagram. I don't have Facebook. So you can find it on LinkedIn. It's just Sam Dowd, and it's vikingfence.com and vikingrentals.com. We're across all the major markets in Texas. So you'll probably see us on a job site or an event near you. So chances are you've already passed our work or seen it somewhere in your community. But yeah, those are the best ways to find us, and reach out if you want to be involved.
I can corroborate that I have literally driven past so many Viking rental fences or Viking Fence.
Yeah, it's a 52-year-old company, so
they're everywhere,
and we're still looking to grow and advance and evolve. So thank you for having me, and thank you for giving us an opportunity to have a discussion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we'll talk soon.
All right. Thank you.